Good afternoon, and once again, welcome to VetNet. My name is Jason Dozier, Manager of Plants and Operations here at Hire Heroes USA. And I'm joined by Matthew Grove out of our Alpharetta office and Jesse Sanchez out of our Seattle office. And I'm also joined by Christina Presley out of our Seattle office as well. Before we get into the class, we're going to be talking about resume writing. And before I get into class, just a quick reminder to all of you who have never been on one of these hangouts before. VetNet is an ongoing partnership between ourselves here at Hire Heroes USA, veterans and military families at Syracuse University, and Google. And we've done this partnership for about 2 years, and that's culminated in about roughly 40 to 50 Google Hangouts a year. Like I said, we do these trainings every week at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And our training events include resume writing, interviewing, networking, strategic planning, LinkedIn. So we cover kind of the whole gamut of what you need to do to be successful in your military transition, fitting well into the civilian workforce. And we strongly encourage you to either subscribe to our YouTube page or follow us on Google Plus, or to register for services here at Hire Heroes USA. One of our veteran transition specialists like Matthew or Jesse or Christina will work with you one-on-one until you find a job or you know your services. So I only encourage you to do that. But without further ado, Matt, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks, Jason. My name is Matthew Grobe. I'm here at Hire Heroes USA. I'm a veteran transition specialist here. And like many veterans, I also had gone through the transition process not just once, but twice. I got out after my second enlistment, finished school, went back in as an officer, and retired a little over 2 years ago. So the transition experience is very fresh in my memory. And to be quite honest, it was actually kind of experiencing some of that frustration and coming to Hire Heroes USA that helped me out. So much to the point where I said, hey, if an opportunity comes available to work at Hire Heroes USA, I'm on board, and that came to fruition. And what we really do here is we really enjoy helping veterans and their families through the transition process so that they're ultimately successful in transitioning from military service to civilian employment. So that's a little bit about me. I come from an Army background, 23 years total service, most of it overseas, but definitely enjoying the civilian side, but still able to serve in a different capacity now. And I'll turn it over to Jesse.
Hi, my name is Jesse Sanchez, and I've been with Hire Heroes for just a little over 2 years. Marine Corps veteran, served for 8 years, got out, took advantage of my GI Bill benefits, and then transitioned right into a career at Hire Heroes USA. So I've been there, done that, and I'm happy to share my knowledge and resources with you.
All right, and then we should be heading back to the slides.
Matt, are you able to see the slides?
Okay, they're up now. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to talk about resume writing today. And the resume is really essentially your fundamental building block on your job search. It's probably the most common tool that people are familiar with already. And so we're going to talk today about that and how to build a resume and how to leverage it to your advantage. What we're going to focus on today is primarily a corporate style resume. So you'll see a chronological and a functional are going to be the most prevalent ones. And then, federal resume for those seeking federal jobs. We do have some expertise that can help out with that, but primarily we're focused today on corporate style, about 2-page resume. So moving on, you'll see an example on the next slide what a typical resume would look like. And what we're going to kind of do is we're going to break it down by the sections. The resume, like I said, is really your foundational building block. And really the purpose of the resume is to get an interview. This is your ticket to the conversation or your ticket to the dance. So that being said, what it's really designed to do is capture the qualifications and skills that you have for the job that you're applying to, and to do it in a certain manner that is going to get you some conversations. That's really the intent behind it. It's about the 80% solution, I like to tell people, because no resume is ever going to be absolutely perfect. There are no cookie cutter solutions. So I want people to start thinking about how to use a resume and tailor it to positions that they apply to, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about that, because that's where you're going to start to experience success. Where people, and this is veterans and civilians alike, experience frustration with not getting callbacks or getting hits off of their resume, is they're often using the exact same resume for every kind of job that they apply to, and it's not matching them. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to break that down, a little bit about tailoring it so that you can increase your probability of success. Okay, we're going to focus primarily on the front portion. About the first third to maybe half a page is really the most important real estate on your resume. This includes your header, your summary qualifications, and some areas of expertise. And as you see on the side here, this is the 10-second test. And what we mean by that is, on average, people looking through or screening resumes are really only going to scan it and maybe read parts of it on an average about 10 seconds. And they'll make a decision based off of that whether your resume goes into the yes pile or to the no pile, and maybe they have a maybe pile. But the intent is make sure that this resume up front and this first page up front has all the things that are relevant to the job that you're applying to. If you have all that information and those skills and qualifications buried on the bottom of the page or on page 2, they may never even look at it, and your resume will go to the no pile. So really, if nothing else, this is the most important piece of your resume, and you want to make sure that if you take this professional summary out just by itself and they read only this, they will have enough information to make a decision. Okay, when we break that down a little bit further, the header includes your name, your email address, maybe your mailing address, your basic contact information. And not to understate this, but this is actually where people start to form their first impressions of you as a potential candidate. And there's certain things in here that you want to make sure that you definitely represent well. Just a simple name works. You don't have to go into elaborate details of your qualifications or anything like that up in your name. Probably the only areas where that will really pertain to is specific qualifications that are needed for the job. For example, if you are applying for jobs in the IT field, up here next to your name, you may want to put your certifications with you. If you are applying for medical positions, if you are a registered nurse, for example, and you have a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, it's okay to put RN and BSN next to your name because they want to see that up front. But for most positions, just a simple name will suffice. On the next line is your address. It's up to you. There is no right or wrong answer as far as whether you should put your street address or not. Some people will interpret just city, state, and zip code as being open to relocation. Some candidates prefer not to provide those details, and that's okay. But by and large, you should consider having at least city, state, and zip. And if you are applying to positions in a different area, different geographical area where you live, put the city, state, and zip where you intend to be or where you're applying to jobs. Because if you're open to relocating to that area, or if you are going to be getting out of the military and going back to that area, it starts to present yourself as a local candidate, and that's important so that they don't think, oh, this is a qualified person, but I might have to pay for their relocation. Okay, it may exclude you from some conversations. So make yourself look as local as possible. The next thing I definitely want to talk about is your phone number. Some people will put their home number, some people will put their cell number. Probably the best recommendation I personally prefer is the best number that they will reach you at. And usually that's going to be your personal cell phone. One number will suffice as long as you can get your phone calls at that number. On that note, please consider leaving a very professional voicemail message on your cell phone. A number of people may start calling you, a lot of recruiters, and they may be calling 100 people per day. So to help make sure that they got the right person and that that number does belong to you, make sure that you have a very professional voice message on your voicemail. And if you can't take that call right now, that may be the very first impression they're ever going to get of you, of hearing you speak. So you want to make sure it represents you well. Same thing with your email address. Your email address, you want a professional, very simple, plain email address, and we usually recommend Gmail. It's considered the industry standard, it's norm, it's kind of current trends. A lot of people still have Yahoo accounts or AOL or Earthlink accounts, and that's okay if you have those for your personal use, but I recommend not using them because it does two things. It suggests or can infer that you're not in touch with current industry standards, and it also can be used to perceive potential age issues. So people that have, Earthlink or AOL, people looking at these resumes might say, wow, this person is not exactly young. And I hate to say it, but it is a real observation that age discrimination, it's out there. So something as simple as a Gmail address or something that's very professional, your first name, your last name at Gmail, can just make all the difference and give nobody anything to discriminate or otherwise filter you out right before they even look at your rest of your resume. You'll also notice here that we include a LinkedIn URL. I recommend this if you have a really good LinkedIn profile because 9 times out of 10, if anybody's looking at your resume, the next place that they're going to look at is your LinkedIn profile. So if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, I suggest you start one, and we can help you out with that and coach you through how to do that. But I would recommend putting it on there so that way if they want to look at that, they can click right on that link and it'll take you right to your LinkedIn profile. It makes their job a little bit easier. Okay. Moving on to the professional summary. Again, this is really the meat and potatoes of the resume. This is probably the most important part right here. And you'll see on here that it's a brief paragraph. Okay, it is written in fragmented sentences, so you're going to get those green squiggly lines when you do your grammar check as you're writing it, and that's okay because it's designed to be that way, and people reading it are going to understand that. But it's written in simple language to highlight your key qualifications for that particular job that you're applying to. And we like to use bold print in strategic areas to focus attention on that. Remember, people are scanning and they're just looking for things. So that bold print really draws the eye's attention to things that really apply to that particular job. And this is the other things that you want to tailor to the job. And what do I mean by tailor? For example, you see that on here, this person starts right off as an information technology project manager. And it's probably done that way because this person is probably applying for the job title of information technology project manager. It's a match right from the get-go. That's exactly what they've done. Maybe your military job was different. Maybe your last job was different. But you want to convey that you're a match. You are already what they're looking for by title. If, for example, you're applying for a job as a senior widget maker, it doesn't matter what it is. If you've made widgets before and you've supervised and taught people how to make widgets and you're applying for the job, call yourself a senior widget maker. You want to make yourself match. And you want to do the same thing throughout the rest of your professional summary to convey that you fit that job description that you're applying to. And you'll also see throughout here some of those key things that really make you stand out. Military veteran, which branch of service you were in, some of your key accomplishments that you've achieved, what your education levels are, maybe some of your awards, the things that make sense that are going to really attract attention. Again, the goal of this is to pass that 10-second test and have them say, I want to talk to this person in the form of an interview. Let's get this person in here. That's the goal. Okay. Looks like we may have lost the slides again, but that's okay. They'll come back up. The other portion right under there, you may have seen the bullets that were listed underneath that. And those are what are considered your areas of expertise or maybe your core competencies, whatever you want to call it. It's just a bulletized list of key buzzwords or qualifications that make sense, kind of tell you what you've done and what you're an expert on. These are also some of those tailorable things that are going to help you make yourself a match to the job description. So in the example that's on here, they talk about strategic planning, leadership and training, operational reporting, and those are probably on there because you have those expertise, and that's probably what's required for the job that this resume is designed to apply for. So again, those are interchangeable, and we only recommend about 9 bullets. You know, in some rare cases, maybe you can go up to 12, but anything beyond that, it just starts to look like you're all over the place, and you're just kind of throwing stuff on there to try to make it look like you can do everything. So again, your resume needs to be tailored and targeted to that specific job. Okay. And if we are going further to the breakdown of chronological and functional, we'll go a little bit into detail on this. On the next slide, you'll see kind of a chronological and a functional side by side. A chronological just basically means you're going in order by time, and it starts from the present moment and goes backwards in time. And you should only go back about 10 years. That's about all you really have room for, and to limit it to about 2 pages, no more than. Because let's face it, everybody in America has a little bit of attention deficit disorder. Anything beyond 3 pages, they're not going to read it. Like I said, they're scanning it. They want to make a decision because they've got 100 other resumes that they've got to look through. So don't go over to 3 or 4 pages because they're not going to look at it. So focus on those 2 pages, cut it off to 10 years. If you have important information and accomplishments that you want to bring on there, just bring it up a little bit. They're not going to know, oh, well, you know, that accomplishment that you listed there is actually 11 years old, not 10. They're not going to know. Okay, if it's important and it helps you portray your qualifications for that job, just bring it forward. On the right-hand side, you'll see a functional. And a functional really doesn't pertain to particular timelines or anything. It just kind of shows key areas that you have experience in, and these experiences or qualifications or accomplishments may have come from different areas. And you just kind of list them out, and maybe you did some things over in Germany, and you did some things when you were deployed, maybe you did things in a civilian corporation, but they all pertain to a particular function, and you can catalog them underneath that function and just align them that way. A lot of times a functional resume can be used to cover or address any potential gaps in employment, or otherwise things that just kind of make sense as far as just, if you're looking for somebody that has project management experience, just talk about your projects that you've managed and highlight those key things, because they're looking for somebody that has a good portfolio of projects, for example. And then you'll see down at the bottom, your experience is really just kind of compressed to what jobs you did and when. It's really kind of an abbreviated history. Okay. Then moving on to the next one, we start to go back to the chronological, and we talk a little bit more about the professional experience itself. The professional experience is basically what you put up there in the summary in further detail. So if they do perchance say, yeah, this resume is very interesting, I wanted to learn a little bit more, they'll go down to your professional experience, and you can kind of tell a little bit more about what you've done, what your roles and responsibilities were, as well as what your accomplishments were in a little bit greater detail. It's kind of like the supporting evidence to your professional summary. You get to tell a little bit more. The key thing here is on your bullets, and we'll get into this a little bit more in the next slide, is you want to make sure that the information is relevant, but you also want to make sure that you're quantifying your accomplishments. Okay. So if we do go on to the next slide, here you start to see like an entry that's broken down line by line. For most people, especially veterans coming out, that maybe the military was their only work experience, it's okay to list the branch, or what you did. In this case, United States Marine Corps. If you're in the Air Force or the Army, Coast Guard, Navy, whatever it is, it's okay to list that. And we actually recommend doing that because if you list the units, or the ships that you've been assigned to, or the companies or the organizations, whatever you are, most of the times you may be dealing with civilians that don't understand the difference between a brigade and a battalion, and don't understand the abbreviations of Navy ships. They don't know the difference between a destroyer and an aircraft carrier. I've been in the Army 23 years. I hardly know the difference. So you just want to make sure that you just communicate, look, you're in the Marine Corps, and then you can go into greater detail on what that means. Same thing with your job title. What we recommend is put in your civilian equivalent. And we can help you get a little bit creative to kind of help match that, but the bottom line is you want to start communicating what you've done and what you've accomplished in ways that civilians can understand. So sometimes civilianizing your job title is a huge advantage to you. Same thing with kind of the description. You'll see a description of what you did, kind of like your job duties. Brief little, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 sentences that just kind of says this is your roles and responsibilities, and then use bullets to list out your significant accomplishments on that. And like I said before, quantify those accomplishments as much as possible. Dollar figures, numbers, percentages, those types of things really help to convey the impact that you've had on your organization.
Matt, can I add something?
Absolutely.
When it comes to translating your military experience, for example, your job title or even your description role, a really good resource is Google itself. Google civilian equivalent to executive officer, civilian equivalent to platoon sergeant. These areas have already been researched, so the information is out there. That is it.
Awesome. Okay, the other thing on the accomplishments to consider is, in the military we come from a culture, an organizational culture of not taking individual credit for group activities or group accomplishments. And the civilian world is not like that. This is an area where a lot of veterans will sell themselves short because they don't want to take individual credit for what their team or what their company or what their organization has done. And you can actually sell yourself short by not listing that, and things that you, even if you didn't accomplish them yourselves, we understand it takes a team to do significant things, but they want to know what you were involved in. It's not necessarily being egotistical or being a braggart, if you say that these are the things that you've accomplished or you've achieved, because you had a piece in that. So that's one of those things where we start to run into some cultural differences between corporate America and military veterans. And a lot of people coming out are very uncomfortable about doing that and putting that on their resume, saying, well, I can't take credit for that. But that's information is something that you had a piece in that could really help sell yourself and your qualifications to some potential employers, because if you were involved and had a piece in that, chances are you can replicate that at their company. So consider that, and think about some of the things, the impact that you've had to really bring out some of your accomplishments. On the next slide, we'll take a little bit of an example. So you have a veteran saying, well, I don't really have a civilian equivalent, so I don't know, what an infantryman does in the civilian world. Yeah, and there probably is not an equivalent of an infantry in the civilian world, and I hope there ever isn't. That's the purpose of our military. But you can take a look at some of the things here, and we have an example of what makes sense in the infantry world, of an example of successfully performing patrols in combat, which resulted in 50 enemy KIA and secured 15 HVTs. Okay, how many civilians out there may understand what HVTs are? Or maybe they know what KIA is, but is that how we want to best portray that to civilians? And you'll see an example on the next slide of how that can be translated. And that example then reads, superior security operations management skills led and conducted over 100 combat patrols over a 12-month period in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, which resulted in the capture of 15 most wanted enemy combatants. It is something that if a civilian is reading that, they'll understand it. It doesn't sound too violent. It doesn't sound too dramatic. It just kind of starts to portray the scope and magnitude of what you've done. And it's not in a language that may potentially put people off. Okay, so these are some of the things, like I said, you don't have to do this alone. This is what we're here to help you out with. A lot of us have been doing this for a little while, that we could probably get to the point where you tell me your MOS or your NEC, and I could probably tell you about 90% of what you've done and probably aren't giving yourself credit on. And I bet a number of our veteran transition specialists can do the same. These are a lot of things that we get pretty good at, is helping you translate those skills in terms that civilians will understand. Okay. Just like Jesse mentioned earlier, Google is a great tool. And on the next slide, you'll see an example of some military school skills translators that are out there that can help you. Now we have kind of some of our own philosophy on there. What we kind of come to consensus on is that these are not the end-all be-all. These are great resources to kind of get inspiration from, and say, okay, this is kind of what my skills or what my MOS or my NEC or whatever you did in the military. These are some civilian equivalents, so it's good to use that. You know, if you cut and paste it right off of that translator, it's going to look canned. So again, just use that as inspiration to kind of fuel your thoughts. But another good point is that this can really help you understand what things you can do in the civilian world. Does that sound about right, Jesse?
Yeah, that sounds great. And what you were mentioning earlier about just cutting and pasting these military skills translators is that, one, you're just going to list your job description, which is a really high tendency amongst civilian and military people to do. What you want to do is, if that's what you have, is to individualize it, and that means going back to what Matt was saying earlier and providing quantifiable details that are going to differentiate you from your competition instead of just description alone.
Excellent. So again, the point is, you know, if you have any questions about that, these are great tools for you. But again, you're not alone. Contact us. Let us know. We will help you out with that because we've done this a number of times, and it can really help you convey how that translates over. And another good piece on it, you'll see it also in some of our other classes about networking. But this is a good idea as well. Talk to people that are in that industry or that company that you're looking at, and bounce some ideas off and get feedback from them to say, okay, this is what I did in the military. What does that sound like to you in the civilian world? And they can be a tremendous source of guidance and advice on how to portray that on a resume. You know, so definitely take advantage of that, and you know, don't be afraid to get out there and talk to people. Get some advice from actual civilians on what a civilian resume should look like as well, and how to convey that on a resume. Okay, and then our last portion of there, we kind of summarize some of the key things like your education, your certifications, and awards. You'll notice that up back in the professional summary, you know, we brought some of your education forward. And a lot of times, if you have a master's degree or a bachelor's degree or an associate's or some kind of technical certification that is going to help you be qualified for the job you're applying to, you want to put that up there in that summary because, like I said, they may not get to page 2 to determine whether or not you have a degree or if you have a particular certification. In some areas like IT and medical that I referenced earlier, you probably actually want to move your certifications up to page 1 so that they do see them because that's exactly what they're looking for. And then everything else kind of shifts down. If you, for example, are applying to a job that requires a PMP or a Project Management Professional certification or Lean Six Sigma, and you have those, you want to reference those up front in your summary, and then this will kind of list it further in detail. So they'll see that right up front that you have those certifications. And then a final thought on awards. You know, if you have room on there, it's great. You know, it kind of helps convey that, but again, civilianizing it helps a little bit. You want to spell them out just like they're listed here. Okay, they may not understand what a CAR is, but if you spell it out, a combat action ribbon, they could probably Google that and find out, oh, what is that? And they can find out a little bit more about that. Recommend limiting it to maybe about the top 5 that you have. We'll see a number of people that would take great pride in their accomplishments and the medals and ribbons and decorations that they've earned, but you want to make sure that it makes sense to whoever's reading it. You know, the other thing that it can definitely help support, especially when you start to see multiple awards, is that it starts to also support that, you know, you're not an average person, that you've actually done some significant things and have been formally recognized for that. So a good example is, you know, if somebody doesn't understand what a Bronze Star medal is and they ask you, well, what did you get that for? You can talk about that, and guess what? That's one of your significant accomplishments probably. But when you also start to tell them, well, that's a high-level award that's awarded, by a 2-star general. People understand what a 2-star is. They may not understand, anything else, but they'll understand things like that. It starts to demonstrate a little bit further scope of, what you've done and how you've been formally recognized for that.
Matt, can I just add one thing?
Yes.
Um, Kind of going back to just your resume in general, you want your education and certification to be, one, up to date. If they're expired, you might not want to list them unless you're about to get them recertified. And two, if they're older than 10 years, your training, it's probably outdated and you might want to consider leaving it off. But as far as your education goes, like your bachelor's degree, your master's degree, also to consider leaving off the year if it is substantially older. That's it.
Great point. Great point. And this next slide, you start to see, kind of in rank order, some of the most common mistakes that people make on resumes. This is not unique to veterans. These are all people applying. And you see typos as the #1 killer on resumes. And this is almost unforgivable in today's day and age. Almost everything has spell check on it. So there really shouldn't be an excuse for having typos on there. There's people that can help proofread that. That's another thing that we're here for. We can help you with your resume to make sure you don't commit some of these things that are going to kill your resume from the get-go. Now, military-specific things that'll definitely contribute to this is those acronyms. You should spell out those acronyms on there because we might understand them, but if your resume looks like acronym soup, they're not going to be interested. They don't understand it. They're just going to set it aside saying, I don't know what this guy or gal does. So spell them out and make sure you spell them out correctly. The other thing, just as I mentioned before, not tailoring your resume. You want to make sure that your resume and your job description, if you hold them up side by side, you really shouldn't be able to tell too much of a difference, and that's when you know you're a good match. So tailoring that's what we mean by tailoring your resume, making yourself match the job description as best as possible without obviously fabricating any lies or exaggerating to the points where you're just trying to put things in there to match and it doesn't make sense. But you want to match it as best as possible so that when you're talking to them, you can tell them exactly what you did and that makes you qualified for that or why that's a match. People are going to tell when you don't tailor your resume and you won't get those matches. And what we probably should have mentioned earlier, but I'll bring it up now, is that most times your resume is first going to get looked at by a computer scan. Most of the times they're just looking for keywords and where it matches on your resume before a set of human eyes even look at your resume. So you want to make sure that you tailor your resume to increase your odds of being passed on to the next level. Just making the cut. Like I said, you're playing the computer game first before a human looks at it. And then you can kind of see the rest of the things that are listed on there. No list of skills or the areas of expertise. Those buzzwords, that's your opportunity to put your buzzwords up there and make yourself a match. And as we mentioned before, an inappropriate email address. Before they even got to know what you do or what you've done, they see your email address and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person put this as their email address. And I will save the public from some of the things that we've seen. But I'll tell you, probably everybody has a list of some of the egregious offenses, but what we'll also have with those stories are when those people made changes to a more professional resume, their success rate went significantly higher just because of an email address. Okay. And then some of the other things that you can see on there, printing it on decorative paper, or putting on a photo. Your resume is really just going to be very simple. It doesn't need to be elaborate. It doesn't need to be a print production effort or anything. It should be really simple, no graphics, no pictures, for a number of reasons. Primarily because, like I said before, since your computer is going to look at this first, if you have to upload a resume, you may have very limited space memory-wise to put this on their server. And a lot of those things that you put on there, those graphics and lines all over the place and pretty little boxes and different colors and photos, they're not going to import very well. So something just simple text and maybe 1 line or 2 line to separate key areas is going to be sufficient for you, and that format will be well preserved in most computer settings. So after all of that, we kind of come to the end where we have our list of do's and don'ts, and it's really a summary of things that if you do those things, like target your qualifications and tailor it to the job that you're applying to, and not use those acronyms, making sure that you have your resume tailored, well written, without grammar and spelling errors, with a professional email, your chances of success go significantly higher. So the thing is, like we said, don't send a resume out there that has those kind of typos. Make sure somebody proofreads it. Get another opinion on it. Get another set of eyeballs to take a look and make sure that your resume is spelled, that you've got the thing spelled properly. Use of pronouns. Nothing on your resume should ever be used in the first person. So you don't want to use the words like I. It's inferred, it's understood, but you don't want to use that. A lot of people will take a look and say, it's not about you, but it is. So you don't want to do that, use the word I. Leave it in the third person, talking about yourself and your qualifications. And then we mentioned photographs and falsifying data. Nothing kills a career opportunity than putting on a resume just to get past the system and then finding out that you don't have those qualifications. Number one, you're no longer a candidate, but number two, you're never going to be a candidate at that company for any other opportunities because they know that you have an honor or an integrity issue. So, like I said, portray yourself as close a match as possible to that job description without fabricating any lies or exaggerating to the point where they can tell you're just making stuff up to fit. Okay. So again, if you have any questions about any of that, please feel free to give us a call, or you see our email addresses on here. Send us a note. Get in contact with us. Go to our webpage. Get in touch with us by any means necessary. We'll get back to you and help you out. Okay. With that, I'll leave it open to anything else. Jesse, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. You did great.
Okay. With that, then I'll turn it back over to our moderator, Jason, if he has any closing remarks.
I don't have any closing remarks, but I just want to thank everybody out there for joining, and we will see you next week.